Let me tell you about the winter of 1692. Salem Village, Massachusetts, a small Puritan settlement, deeply religious, tightly controlled. Everyone knew everyone. And in 6 months, this quiet village would become the site of the deadliest witch hunt in American history. 19 people hanged, 1 man crushed to death, 4 dead in prison, over 200 accused, 30 convicted. Let me take you back to January 1692, to the house of Reverend Samuel Parris, to the moment everything began. His 9-year-old daughter Betty and 11-year-old niece Abigail were bored. It was a harsh New England winter. There was nothing to do, so Parris's slave, Tituba, told them stories. Harmless fun, until Betty started having fits. February 1692. Betty Parris started having seizures, screaming, convulsing, speaking in tongues. Her cousin Abigail joined in. The village doctor examined them, found nothing wrong physically. So he gave the diagnosis that sealed Salem's fate: witchcraft. Girls were asked who was tormenting them, and they gave 3 names. First, Tituba, the slave, the outsider, the woman who taught them those games. Second, Sarah Good, a homeless beggar who wandered the village asking for food. When people refused, she'd mutter under her breath as she walked away. Third, Sarah Osborne, an elderly woman who'd stopped attending church, who'd scandalized the village by marrying her indentured servant. 3 women, 3 easy targets. February 29th, 1692. Arrest warrants were issued. March 1st, the examinations began. Picture this: a packed meeting house, Magistrate John Hawthorne at the front. He's not there to determine guilt or innocence. He's already decided. He's there to extract a confession. Sarah Good is brought in. She's clutching her 4-year-old daughter, Dorothy, terrified. But here's the trap. Every time Sarah spoke, the girls would shriek, fall to the ground, convulse. They claimed her specter, her invisible. Then came the confession that changed everything. Tituba, probably tortured, definitely terrified, told them what they wanted to hear. She said she'd seen the devil, that Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne were witches too. And then she said the words that ignited hysteria. There are other witches in Salem. The meeting house went silent. If Tituba was telling the truth, how many witches were hiding among them?
March became April. April became May. The accusations exploded. Martha Corey, a respected church member, accused. Her husband, Giles, defended her, so they accused him too. Rebecca Nurse, 71 years old, a grandmother, one of the most beloved women in Salem, deeply pious, accused. When they brought Rebecca Nurse into the meeting house, barely able to walk, she looked at the girls and asked gently, "What have I done to you?" The girls screamed that her specter was perched on the ceiling beam, ready to strike them down. Here's what's chilling. There was a pattern. Land disputes, inheritance battles, old grudges. The accused weren't random. The Putnam family had property disputes. By May, the jails were overflowing. Not just adults, children were being accused. Dorothy Good, 4 years old, was shackled in prison because the girls claimed her specter had bitten them. Then came the trials. Governor Phipps established a special court of oyer and terminer to hear and determine. The first trial, Bridget Bishop, June 2nd, 1992. July 19th. 1692. 5 more executions. Sarah Good, Rebecca Nurse, Susanna Martin, Elizabeth Howe, Sarah Wilds. Sarah Good climbed the scaffold. Reverend Noyes told her, "You are a witch and you know it. You are a liar. I am no more a witch than you are a wizard. If you take away my life, God will give you blood to drink." They hanged her anyway. 23 years later,
Reverend Noyes would die choking on his own blood from internal hemorrhaging. Her curse came true. 4 more hangings, including Reverend George Burroughs, a former minister of Salem Village. The Puritan belief was that a witch couldn't recite the Lord's Prayer perfectly. At the gallows, they tested him. He recited it perfectly. The crowd began to waver. People were crying. Some were shouting to stop the execution. Then, Cotton Mather, one of the most powerful ministers in Massachusetts, rode forward on his horse and proclaimed that the devil could disguise himself as an angel of light. They hanged him, but the worst was yet to come. September 19th, 1692. 7 more people were condemned to hang, but one man, Giles Corey, 80 years old, refused to enter a plea. Why? Giles wanted his land to go to his sons, not to the government. So the court used an old medieval torture called peine forte et dure, pressing. He laid Giles Corey on the ground and began piling stones on top. The goal, crush him until he entered a plea. September 22nd, 1692. The final executions. 8 people hanged in one day, including Martha Corey, Giles's wife. 20 people dead, over 100 still in jail awaiting trial. But then something happened that finally stopped the madness. The girls started accusing people who were too powerful to touch. The wife of a wealthy merchant, the wife of Reverend Hale, one of the judges, even the wife of Governor Phipps himself. That's when the trials ended. Not because of justice, not because anyone realized they'd been wrong.
October 29th, 1692. Governor Phipps dissolved the Court of Oyer and Terminer. A new court was established. Of the 56 remaining cases, only 3 people were convicted, and the governor immediately pardoned all 3. The Salem witch trials were over, but the damage was irreversible. In 1697, Massachusetts observed an official day of fasting and repentance. Judge Samuel Sewall stood up in church and publicly apologized for his role in the trials. In 1706, Ann Putnam, one of the chief accusers, gave a public confession. She said she'd been deluded by Satan and begged forgiveness from the families she'd destroyed. So what really happened in Salem? No witchcraft, no devil, no supernatural evil. It was a perfect storm of fear, power, and human weakness. Puritan society was rigid and paranoid. Any deviation was seen as dangerous. The village was divided by land disputes and political feuds. The girls discovered they had power, real power, and they used it. The adults encouraged them because it served their own purposes. And once it started, no one could stop it, because questioning the trials meant you'd be accused next. The Salem witch trials are a warning about what happens when fear overrides reason, when children's accusations become death sentences, when questioning authority becomes dangerous, when we're so desperate to find evil that we create it ourselves. We tell ourselves it could never happen again, that we're too smart, too civilized, too modern. But Salem wasn't full of monsters. It was full of ordinary people, people who went to church, who loved their families, who believed they were doing the right thing. And in 6 months, those ordinary people killed 20 innocent people.